Hi, my name is Crystal Evers. I am Mrs. Illinois, USA, and I am a carbon monoxide poisoning survivor. In May of 2020, when the world was shut down, my parents decided to buy a new home. At that time, I had been living about an hour and a half from my family, and they were moving closer so that it was only about a 45-minute drive. And that was really exciting for me because being the youngest, I had a different bond with my parents, and I was so excited for them to move closer. When they closed on their home, me and my boyfriend at the time, we stayed at the house and we helped get my grandparents unsettled because at the time my grandparents were living with my parents. They closed on a Friday. On Saturday was when, all the movers showed up. They moved all the boxes into the house. And anyone who moves knows that is one of the most chaotic days. So on Sunday, at this point, we decided that moving's hard. We were just going to relax. One of the best things about this house was that it had an indoor pool in the background. We lived in central Illinois. If you know Illinois, May, it's warm, but it's not warm enough for the water in the pool to have been warm yet. So the first thing we did that morning was my boyfriend and my father went to the pool heater, which was inside, and they turned it on. We let it warm up for a couple hours, and then we spent the afternoon just having so much fun in the sunshine. There was a diving board. We were doing backflips off the diving board while my grandparents watched from the balcony. We just had one of those, picture perfect days outside. And since it was a Sunday at that point, me and the boyfriend decided we needed to go back to where we were living. So he went down into the basement, which was where the pool heater was. And he was getting his toothbrush and his personal hygiene belongings from the basement when he found our cat unconscious with vomit around her. She was 19, so we just kind of thought that she hadn't been handling the move very well. And he told me to go get my parents. So I went upstairs and I grabbed my parents, and we were just kind of sitting there saying goodbye to this cat. And all of a sudden, my mom clutched her chest and fell over. Um, and at this point, my boyfriend went upstairs. He kind of politely excused himself. And then I started feeling really funny. I've always been one of those people who struggles with dehydration whenever I'm in the sun. So I thought I was just super dehydrated. Um, Thinking my mom was just overwhelmed with emotion for the cat that she really loved, I offered to go get her a glass of water. I went upstairs, kind of getting dizzier and dizzier, and I found my boyfriend and I asked him if he knew where the glasses were because we had just moved, the boxes were everywhere. Um, and he said he didn't know, but that he really didn't feel good. And at that point, I kind of stumbled and I fell and I hit my head on a piece of furniture, like a jewelry cabinet or something. And I told him like I didn't really feel good either. And then I remember looking at him and I remember saying, the cat is sick, my mom is sick, we are sick. I think there's a gas leak. And then at this point, he was in the fetal position and he said, do you think we should get out of the, and then he never finished that sentence. At that point, we both went unconscious. Um, thank, Thankfully, but not thankfully, my grandfather around the same time had fallen. They were upstairs, so they were the furthest point of the house from the carbon monoxide that was being pushed into the house through the pool heater. So when he fell, my grandmother was fine. I kind of remember hearing her yelling, but I guess she was yelling for a long time, asking for someone to help her with my grandfather, because he had fallen. And when no one answered, she called 911. A few seconds later, she passed out from the gas. When the paramedics showed up for a fallen elderly assist, they first found me and my boyfriend. I guess they just made some assumptions on us based on the fact that we were college age kids on the floor, and they walked past us. And then when they walked into the room and found my grandfather on the floor as well as my grandmother. They kind of put two and two together, and then went outside and got the gear that they needed, came back in with a tester. Um, and there was so much gas being pumped from the pool heater in the basement that when they measured it, it was close to 400 parts per million. And so they immediately went into action. They called for backup. They started getting, I think my boyfriend and I were the first ones that they pulled out of the house. And then my grandparents, they didn't know my parents were in the basement. When I woke up, they had just found them and got them out. And I looked over. I remember having a panic attack. I don't like when strangers touch me. And I woke up to strangers touching me, and I look over and I see my mom getting resuscitated on the grass. I remember seeing the neighbors just all gathered around watching the tragedy unfold with the new neighbors in the neighborhood. Um, so they finally got everyone out of the house, and we got sent to two different hospitals because they didn't want to overwhelm the hospitals with us. We ended up getting transported to Chicago because that was I think one of two Braddock chambers in the state of Illinois. Um, in Chicago, the decision was made that my boyfriend, my father, and I would go to the chamber first, and then my mother would go in later. There wasn't enough room in it for the three of us plus her with the respirator and all the equipment that they would have needed to put in with her, because at that point she was unconscious still. Unfortunately, before they could put her into the chamber, um, her brain swelled, and she was pronounced brain dead. Um, so that was really hard. My father spent a couple of days in an intensive cardiac unit. My boyfriend and I, we were released the next day. We were deemed fine. My grandparents spent a couple of days in ICU, but they never even got transported because they didn't need it. And the craziest thing about the whole adventure was just how quickly it went from very fine to very not fine. We had no idea there was gas in the home because the carbon monoxide detectors were still in the boxes and drawers. They hadn't been installed yet. Um, so that is the story of one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. Losing my mom. And the same day we went from, sitting on her bed talking about all the things we were going to do now that she lived closer, to me realizing life would never be the same. This is not an easy story to tell, but I'm hoping that it'll help somebody be a little bit safer purchasing a new home, or even just thinking to double check their carbon monoxide detectors. So thank you for listening.